All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for Adele Elbaum, Mrs. Selma Woolf, for dedicating all the Shiurim and Drushos this month. With immense gratitude for the refuos from Hashem and the merit of a refuah for all of those in need, in the zchus of our brave soldiers, and in Meir Hashem in the zchus of the return of our hostages. The Schwarzbaum family, in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwarzbaum, Aharon Yosef ben Meir, zechus and the Lavine and Behrman families, in memory of William Zev Shmuel ben Israel, zechus. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Avron Gali Elbaum, in memory of Avron's grandmother, Adele Elbaum, Bas Israel Pinchas, and of course we dedicate all Maseches Bava Nishmas, Master Sergeant Eliyahu Harush, Hashem Yikom Damo. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, all of the Neshama, Lavine, aliyah, and the families in Neshama. We'll say with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, some really interesting Gemara ahead of us. Today's daf is Kuf Daled 104, and we are picking up on 103b. Kuf Gimel Amud Beis, and specifically we left off. Let's actually move up a little bit. Let's go with Rabbi Tarfon. We'll say, so do you see Tosis Rabbi Tarfon on the right column? If you literally just move your finger leftward, there you'll get to Rabbi Tarfon in the Gemara. Suppose we just reorient ourselves very quickly. We had a Mishnah. What was our Mishnah? I stole from Ruvain, and then I swore that I didn't steal, and then I admitted that I stole. So what's the halacha? I'm chayiv three things. What are the three things? Keren, principal, chomesh, additional fifth, and asham, a carbon. Now the Mishnah introduced us to the concept that halacha, if I want to do tshuva, it's not enough just to go ahead. It's not enough just to go ahead and pay back, but rather what do I have to do? I have to track down the victim and pay back the victim personally. That's the goal. That's the goal. The Gemara just pointed out over here, the only time there seems to be an obligation to chase down the victim personally is when there was a false oath, when there was a shvuah. But if there wasn't a shvuah, it sounds like one could simply deposit the money somewhere. You know, with the victim's kid, the victim's shliach, Beis Din. Well, Beis Din, we'll see, always works. So the Gemara is trying to figure out whose opinion does that reflect. The Gemara aligned this with a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. Remember, again, this was the case if I stole from 5 individuals. They don't know exactly who I stole from, but it's one of the 5. Rabbi Tarfon says, drop and run. Drop and run, right? Drop the item in the middle of the 5 and then run. Let them fight it out. Rabbi Akiva says, no, that's not the way it works. If you want to do tshuva, ultimately you need to make restitution to each of the individuals. The Gemara is trying to align one of these shitos with our Mishnah. So the Gemara said, Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Tarfon would say, it's not necessarily true. Even though you swore falsely, the rabbi still tried to help you out to facilitate your tshuva. How so? The Gemara says, decided Rabbi Tzadok Omer, Takana Gidol Eskinu. The Chazal instituted a great takana. What's the takana? What's the enactment? Shem Haisot Sa Yisera Al Keren. But say, listen to the following case. What happens in a situation where I want to return the object? But the cost involved in tracking down the victim is even more than the amount of the theft. Right? You hear this? What do I do? What do I do in a scenario like that? So the Gemara says, so Eskinu Shim Haisa Hotza Yisir Ala Karen B'Shalin Karen B'Chomesh LeBezdin, or maybe Ashal Miskaperlo. Shabbos said, this is really interesting. So on one hand, we have this takana that says that halacha l'maisa, if you steal from someone and you swear falsely, you have to go ahead and pay it back. But yet the verbiage over here is Chazal made another takana. What's the takana? If the expense of traveling and tracking down the victim is so great that it is going to exceed the value of what you owe, then Chazal instituted, you know what, deposit your money with Beis Din, bring your carbon, and ultimately, again, that's your kapara. You are atoned. You are atoned. Incredible. So this is Rabbi Akiva. So also, therefore, that's Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Akiva, ki av rabbanan takanta. According to Rabbi Akiva, when did the rabbis make this takana? Hecha diyad leman gazle. That's only when you know from whom you stole. The Gemara says, "Dekama le mamona lemare." Ultimately, again, because there's the ability to go ahead and give back the money to the victim. All right, but if you stole, like in the case we mentioned above, from one of 5 people, and you don't know whom you stole from, the lo hadir mamon lemare, where ultimately, again, if you drop it in the middle, the money is not necessarily going back to the owner. Lo avad rabbanan takanta. Ultimately, again, in that case, the rabbanan did not put in this enactment. Okay, so fascinating halacha over here. So Maser from Rabbi Yehuda, Harush ben Elazar lo nechlu Rabbi Rabbi Kiva al shalakach echam mechamisha ve'eni odem ezen lakach. So now watch this. So now the Gemara says, Rafuna brings up a kasha, and he says like this: Rabbi Akiva did not argue in the following case. They did not argue in the case, we'll say, of where, let's say I purchased an item from one of 5 people. But what? I don't know who I purchased it from. So I know I bought, whatever it is, you fill in the blank, whatever it is. I know I bought object from one of 5 people. I don't know who I bought it from. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Shemaniach demei mekach benehem umestalik. In that case, everyone agrees that what could I do? I could drop the purchase amount in the middle of the 5 and then run. Aman nechlaku. So we'll say, what's the machlokes case? Shegazal echa mechamisha b'nei adam ve'ini yodea me'ezeh mehen gazal. So we'll say it's interesting. The theft case, ultimately again, the case that is the machlokes is the theft case. I stole from one of 5 people, but I don't know who I stole from. We'll say first white line on 103b. So Rabbi Tarfon says you just put the money in the middle over there, and what? And then you leave. Rabbi Akiva says no. The halacha is you have to go ahead and pay back each individual. So we'll say so. This is actually an interesting version over here. In this version, the machlokas Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Tarfon is only in the case of theft. Let's say in a parallel case where you bought something, but you don't know whom you bought it from, everyone would agree, put the purchase price in the middle, and then you could leave. The machlokes case is where you stole from one of them, and you don't know whom you stole from. That's the machlokes of Rabbi Tarfon. So the Gemara, now if you would think that this applies even in a case where you swore falsely, mali lakach, mali gazal. So also if we're talking about a case where there's a false oath, then what does it make a distinction if this is a purchase case or a theft case? Va'od masiv Rava. Rava brought down another kasha. So listen to this. Ma'aseh b'chasid echad. It's a great story. There was a story with a chasid. Shelakach, a pious man. Shelakach mishnei b'nei adam v'lo haya yodea me'izen lakach, who bought an object from a person, but he did not remember who he bought it from. Right? So what happened? We'll say, so again, he knew he bought an object. He didn't remember, did he buy it from Ruvain? Did he buy it from Shimon? Ubalifnei Rabbi Tarfon, and this case came up for Rabbi Tarfon. Amar lo, and Rabbi Tarfon said, Hanach demei mekach b'nei v'stalik. Ultimately, again, leave the money in the middle of the 2 guys, and you could leave. Ubalifnei Rabbi Kiva said, Amar lo, im l'cha takana, ashet t'shayim l'chol echad v'echad. Rabbi Kiva said, no, that's not the way it works. The only way to remedy this particular situation is halacha l'maisa to pay them both back. Now, if we're going to set this up ultimately again as a case of a person who went ahead and swore falsely, chassid mi mishtaba b'shikra. Ultimately, again, does a chassid swear falsely? Or as we both say, to get the name chassid, it's not just enough, that's not like an average person who's doing good things. A chassid is a person who adheres to a higher level of piety. So ultimately, again, would a chassid be swearing falsely? Impossible. So this is incredible. Maybe he swore first and then became a chassid later. In other words, we'll say, so that's the having. In other words, maybe, again, he wasn't the chassid at the time of the story. Bakshan, the good news will say, what's the good news in this Gemara? Even if I'm not a chassid now, doesn't mean that I can't become a chassid later. So maybe at the time of the story, ultimately, again, it wasn't a chassid. The person wasn't a chassid, and later on he became a chassid, but he swore falsely. The Gemara said, "Vaha kol heichad da'aminan ma'aseh b'chassid echad." But yet the Gemara said, any time that we tell a story of a chassid echad, or Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, or Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eloi. So we'll say, whenever the Gemara tells a story about a certain chassid, that always refers to one of 2 people, either Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava or Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eloi. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eloi, chasidim d'mei karahavu. We'll say this is an absolutely wild statement. These men, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava and Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eloi, they were chasidim from the beginning. What a dramatic and overwhelmingly beautiful. So I will say, can you imagine about the Gemara being able to say that about you? That you're a person who was a chassid me'ikara. You were a chassid from the beginning. Now, what exactly that means from the beginning? From the beginning, that they obviously will say it doesn't mean that they never committed averus. Every person commits averus, and you could be a chassid even if you commit averus. By the way, definition of a chassid, remember we had this from our Ramchal days, right? Our Mesilas Yesharim days. Definition of a chassid is someone who exceeds expectations. Meaning a chassid is someone who intuits what the will of God is, even beyond the stated obligations of the Torah, and tries to live his life in conformance with those intuitive understandings of what the Ratzon Hashem is. He understands that mitzvos are stated expressions of divine will. Mitzvos tell you what HaKadosh Baruch Hu like, and whereas the regular person meets expectations, the chassid exceeds expectations. So beautiful. Okay, in any event, the Gemara says, so therefore, we can't be talking about a case of a false oath. Ella, Leolam Rabbi Tarfani. So we'll say, so therefore again, the Gemara says, really our Mishnah, so again, let's circle back. Our Mishnah, which says that if you steal, and you go ahead and you swear falsely about that theft, and now you want to make restitution. So you owe. Karen, Chomesh, Asham. The halacha is you have to track down the victim and pay him back personally. So we'll say, so Dafka, this is a case where if you swore falsely, who's the opinion does this reflect? The Gemara says, you're right. The Olam, Rabbi Tarfan Umod Rabbi Tarfan, Heichad V'Ishtaba. And Rabbi Tarfan admits that whereas Rabbi Tarfan normally gives you a little bit of an easier way out, right? So remember again, let's go back for just a second. Rabbi Tarfan is the one who says that if you stole from a person and you don't know exactly who, but you know that it's one of 5 people, what does Rabbi Tarfan say? How do you do tshuva? Drop and run, right? You could drop the item and you could run away, right? But yet Rabbi Tarfan would agree that in the case ultimately where you took a false oath, the stakes are higher. Right? So in other words, you would have expected Rabbi Tarfan to say if you stole and now you want to go and you want to make restitution, you don't have to track down the owner of a haraya. If it's a group of 5, you just drop it in the middle and you run. Yet Rabbi Tarfan agrees that in the case where you swore falsely, the stakes are higher. Now you have a heightened tshuva threshold. So because you have a heightened tshuva threshold, therefore, you must track down the victim in order to go ahead and repay him, and that's your tshuva. Incredible. So the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason? Damar kra, la asherhu lo yitnenu b'yom hashmaso. And I will say, Rabbi Tarfon says, really it's a pasuk. The pasuk says, in the aftermath of a false oath, you have to go ahead and return the item, la asherhu lo, to the person to whom it belongs. Yitnenu, you have to give it to him. So we'll say, so the Torah itself seems to indicate that if you swear falsely about owing something to someone, in order to go ahead and make amends, you must give it back to him. There's an obligation of specific hashava, specific return. Incredible. But Rabbi Akiva would say, Meir will say, Rabbi Akiva, the reason why the Mishnah doesn't reflect the view of Rabbi Akiva is why? Because Rabbi Akiva holds that even in a case where he didn't swear falsely, we also have this knas. What's the knas? The knas is you must return the stolen object to the person who you stole it from. To the point that what? They're going to Rabbi Akiva, even if you're not sure that what? Who is the person who you stole it from? What do you have an obligation to do? Give it to each one. Give it to each one. The Gemara says, "Tarfan michti hechad mishtabel lo saged lo hoda." So we'll say, so now, okay, so therefore, we'll say, so this is where the Gemara is holding right now. Our Mishnah, which says that if you swear falsely, that you have to track down the owner in order to go out and do tshuva, that reflects the view of Rabbi Tarfon. Because Rabbi Akiva would say that even in a case where you don't swear falsely, you're still obligated to track down the owner to go ahead and pay him back. Fine. So Gemara says, now let's analyze. Rabbi Tarfon, michti. Let's analyze this a bit. Hechad mishtabel lo saged lo hoda. So Rabbi Tarfon, now the way we're setting it up, is if halacha l'maisa, is if you swore falsely. Now let's take this all together. It's not just swearing falsely that goes ahead and triggers the obligation to track down the owner. What is it? It's swearing falsely and admitting that you swore falsely, because it's the admittance that now makes you chayiv keren chomesh asham. So Rabbi Tarfon, it wouldn't be enough just to swear if you didn't admit. So therefore, Meir v'nishba. So why do you have to set it up as a case ultimately as you swore? Afilu below shvuah nami. The truth is, even without a shvuah, ultimately, according to Rabbi Tarfon, you should be obligated to return the object directly to the owner. Why? Listen to this. Rabbi Tarfon agrees in the following case. So Mara. So here we go. I go over to Reuven and Shimon. Say, Reuven, Shimon, I know that I stole a mana from one of you. I just don't know which one of you. From one of you, I don't know which one of you. So what's the halacha? No sin lo zemana ula zemana. So I'll say ultimately again the halacha is I have to pay back both of them. Top of Kuf Daled 104a. Why? Shekvar hoda mi pi atzmo. Ultimately again because I admitted already that I owed it. Rashi says over here, type Rashi 104a, Shekvar hoda mi pi atzmo. Uba, let's say Sidei Shemayim, and I remember again, once I admit the theft, so now I want to be able to discharge my obligation in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well. So we'll say, now watch this. So Rabbi Tarfon agrees in this case where I admit that I stole from one of them. Even Rabbi Tarfon agrees that I will say, in order to satisfy my obligation, klape shmaya, in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what do I have to do? I have to repay both of these individuals. Why? Because ultimately I admitted that I stole. Now, what do you see from here? Now, what's intriguing about this case? There's no shavua. Right? Isn't this interesting? There's no oath in this case. What do you have over here? A confession. So it appears that according to Rabbi Tarfon, once you have a confession, you are obligated to go ahead. There's two pieces to this. Once you have a confession, so ultimately, again, in the eyes, we'll call it B'dinei Adam. What do you need to do? Right? Drop and roll. Right? Or drop and run. Right? Wrong thing. Right? You don't have to drop and roll. You should run. Right? So I'll say, so again, what do? You drop the object and then you run away. But in the eyes, ultimately, again, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Klape Shmaya, you admitted that you stole. You don't know who you stole from. Well, if you want to make good, you got to pay back both guys. So this is Rabbi Tarfon even without a shvuah. So I'll say, once again, we're back to whose opinion is reflected in the Mishnah. Ela Amarava, shiny masnisin. The Mishnah is different. Why? The chayvan, both say second line, 104a. The chayvan, the yada leman gazle. Both say, see, the Mishnah's case is different. Why is the Mishnah's case different? In the Mishnah's case, I know who I stole from. Right? I know that I stole from Ruvain, va'odile, and ultimately again, I confessed. Now, granted, the Mishnah has one additional complicating layer, which is when did I confess? After an oath. So I stole, I swore falsely that I didn't steal, and then I confessed that I stole, and I know exactly who I stole from. So I will say, since there is the possibility, I know who I stole from. Because I know that who I stole from, therefore what? There is the ability to return the stolen object directly to the victim. Listen to this, is crazy. So I'll say, now watch this. This is fascinating. Okay, watch this progression. I'll say, when I steal from someone, and ultimately again, I go ahead and I know who I stole from. I know who the victim was, and I admit that I stole from the person. So I will say, so in general, the way it works in halacha is, in that moment, it's as if the victim says, okay, I know you have my stuff, do me a favor, hold it for me until I can get it from you. Right? In other words, it's almost as if now the thief becomes the shomer. Right? Now I will say, now this makes a lot of sense. Why does it make a lot of sense? Because Lamaise, here's what's fascinating. I steal from Ruvain, right? I admit that I stole from Ruvain. So now, I'm not going to be able to get it back to him that second. Let's say Ruvain lives somewhere else, right? I can't get it back to him that second. The halacha wants to make sure that what? That I have responsibility for that item, like a shomer, right? Until I go ahead and I get it back ultimately to Ruvain. So therefore, it's fascinating because what happens now, the mechanics of this are that I admit that I stole. At that moment, Ruvain says, okay, thank you for your confession. Appreciate your honesty. I'm going to deposit my object with you until I can get it back. Till I get it back. So therefore, again, I'm still responsible as a thief. I'm responsible for it also, but I'm responsible for that object. Now watch this. The Gemara says, Hilchach, Nishba, and I will say in a case where I swore that I did not steal. Turns out that I lied and I confess. So even though technically speaking now that I admitted that I stole, so Reuben says, okay, hold on to it for me until I get back. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, Kevan devai kapara lo sagi adimati liyadei. Ultimately, again, about to say, since I now need kapara, there's an additional layer over here of a false oath. So it's not, the kapara is not complete until when? Until ultimately, again, I get the object back to his hand. So we'll say, see what's happening here is actually quite fascinating. In a general situation, what the Gemara seems to be suggesting over here is, if I steal, and I confess that I steal, there's a certain element of my kapara, of my atonement, that has already taken effect because I confessed. Right? And therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, the object remains with me until someone can get it back to the owner. In a case where I stole and I swore falsely, swearing falsely adds an additional level of liability that is not remedied until the object is returned to the hands of the owner. So because of that, there's an immediacy in my obligation to return the object in order to affect my own kapara. So the Gemara says, ha lo ishtaba. So therefore, again, if I didn't swear falsly, havi gabe pikadon, it would be treated like a pikadon, like a deposit, ad da'asi v'shakile. Ultimately, again, until the individual came and reclaimed it. So Rabbi say, this is really quite fascinating. So what the Gemara seems to end up saying is as follows: that the truth is there's something different going on over here. It's not even as much rooted in Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon, which is an interesting machlokes by itself. But rather, again, on both sides, swearing falsely adds an additional level of liability in a theft case. The way it works in a regular theft case is, I steal from Ruvain. If I admit that I steal, okay, I now have to pay back the object, maybe even kefil, depending on what the situation is. But I both say, but now the way it works is, I am required to watch that object until somehow I'm able to get it to Reuven, or Reuven is able to get it to me. But what's interesting is the confession itself provides some level of kapara, some level of atonement. In the case where I stole, I swore that I did not steal, then I admit that I swore falsely, that additional level of liability cannot be remedied until when? Until I actually return the object. Therefore, because that level of kapara is not affected until I return the object, therefore, what does the Mishnah say? I am obligated to seek out the victim in order to return the object and complete my kapara. Absolutely incredible. Let's go back there. Itmar, shliach shaso be'edim. This is another really interesting case. All these cases are related. I make a shliach, I make an agent in front of witnesses. Now, what's the situation? Look at Rashi. Rashi's almost right across. Shliach shaso be'edim. Ruvain, shish lamos biyad Shimon. So we'll say, watch this. Ruvain lent money to Shimon. Now, this is not a theft case right now. This is a lending money case. So Ruvain lent money to Shimon. Mina shaliach be'edim lekablam hemen ruvain. So we'll say, now watch this. Let me just take this outside for just a second. In general, if Ruvain lends money to Shimon, and now Ruvain wants to get paid. So we'll say the issue is, if an intermediary is appointed to go ahead and collect the money from Shimon and bring it to Ruvain, Shimon has to be very wary of that. Why? Because we'll say, what happens if something happens to the money on the way back from Shimon to Ruvain? Right? Shimon wants to know that if he gave that money to someone for the sake of repayment, he's done. He's done. He doesn't want to be on the hook for it. So we'll say, so now watch this case. In this case, Ruvain lent money to Shimon. Now, Ruvain appointed a shaliach in front of witnesses to go and collect the money from Shimon and bring it back to Ruvain. So we'll say, so now what's the shaila? What's the status of that witness? Rav Chisda says, Havi shliach. Rav Chisda says it works. So we'll say, what does it mean it works? What it means is that once Shimon gives the money, Shimon is the debtor, right? Once Shimon gives the money to that shaliach, Shimon is done. It's as if Shimon has paid back Ruvain, and if something happens to the money in transit, Shimon is not responsible for that. That's what it means, Havi Shaliach. Okay. Rabbi Amarav says, no, lo Havi Shaliach. Says, no. It doesn't work. In fact, again, Shimon is responsible for that money until when? Until that money actually gets back to Ruvain's hands. And if something happens with Shaliach on the way back, Shaliach is robbed. Right? Shliach loses the money. In those cases, halacha l'maisa, Shimon will still be on the hook. All right, so let's go on over here. So remember again, Rav Chisda says this works. This is it, right? Because remember, what is Ruvain doing? I will say, what is Ruvain doing? Ruvain is appointing the shaliach in front of the witnesses. Right? Why is he doing that? Why is he doing that? To show that this guy is an extension of me. Right? To show that this is a bona fide shlichus, and therefore, again, Shimon, when you give the money to Ruvain, when you give the money to shliach, you're done. Rabba Amar Lo Havi Shliach, listen to this. Rabba says, no. That's not what's happening over here. So Ruvain, when he appoints the shliach in front of the witnesses, is not appointing him as a bona fide shliach. So that when Shimon gives him the money, ultimately, again, Shimon is off the hook. Rather, what is he doing? Hachi Kamar. Here's what Ruvain's saying. Inish Mehemnahu. This guy, the shliach, he's a solid guy. He's a solid guy. Isamchis samach. So Shimon, if you want to rely on him, rely on him. And if you want to go ahead and send it back with shaliach, you have the ability to do so. So Rabbi said, listen to this. Essentially, it's fascinating. What Rabbi is saying is, when Reuven appoints the shaliach in front of witnesses, it's kind of like a character reference. He's saying, listen, this guy is a good guy. Shimon, really, it's on you to get me that money. Right? You have to pay me back the money. So you really should go ahead and travel to me and give me the money. If you want to travel to me, listen, I could recommend this guy shaliach. He's a solid guy. I know him for a long time. He's a good guy. It's a character reference. But I'm not saying, but this shaliach, it's not me. It's not me. It's not Reuven. So in other words, if you would like to use him, that's your choice. But understand, you bear responsibility. And so if something happens to that money in transit, at the end of the day, Shimon, that's on you. That's on you and not on me. I'm just telling you, I've used this guy before as a courier. I've used him as a shaliach. He's dependable, right? He's got 5 stars. He's fantastic. But Lamaisa, he's not an extension of me. I just want to be clear on that. It was very interesting. So let's analyze. So Tnan. So also we learn another interesting case. So Tnan, Hasholas hapara v'shilcha biyad beno. Supposed to listen to this. So Reuven lends a cow, ultimately again to Shimon. So what does he do? Hasholas hapara v'shilcha biyad beno, biyad avdo, biyad shlucho, o biyad beno, biyad avdo, biyad shlucho shel shoel. So I'll say, so now watch this. Reuven lends a cow to Shimon. Reuven sends the cow to Shimon, right, with Reuven's son, with Reuven's Eved, or with Reuven's Shaliach. Or for that matter, Shimon, who's the borrower, right, sends his son, his Eved, or his Shaliach to go ahead and retrieve the cow. And what happens? In transit, the cow dies. So Mesa, ultimately, again, the cow dies in transit. So what's the halacha? Pater. Ultimately, I will say in these cases, the borrower is going to be pater. It's going to be pater. So I will say, let's analyze a little bit. Now Rashi says over here, pater, so we're going to see what's missing in this particular case over here is there was no explicit instruction from the borrower to the lender to send the animal to him this way. Right? So in other words, Reuven has agreed to lend the cow to Shimon. There was never any, let's see in the Gemara. Hi shluchos. We'll say, so now, the point over here is, whether Reuven the lender is sending the cow in the hand of, now the first case is obvious, right? If Reuven is sending it in the hands of his son, his Eved, his Shaliach, that means that, and it dies in transit, that means what? It was still in Reuven's rishos. It was with his people. Right? The chiddush over here is that if Shimon sends his son, his Eved, his Shaliach to go ahead and get the cow, and the cow dies in transit, Shimon is still pater. Shimon is pater. So Meir says, wow, that's interesting. What's the case? Hi shlucho echidami. So we'll say, what is the case where Shimon, the borrower, is sending his Shaliach to retrieve the cow, and the cow dies in transit? What's that case? Hi shlucho echidami. So we'll say, if it's a case where Shimon did not appoint the Shaliach in front of witnesses, then how would anyone know that this Shaliach is really the Shaliach of Shimon the borrower? Ela da'asa be'edim. Rather, it must be that what? Shimon appointed the shaliach in the presence of witnesses. He did in the presence of witnesses, and yet, what do you see? V'katani depater. And ultimately, we'll say, so watch this. Even though Shimon, the borrower, appointed this shaliach in the presence of witnesses, you still see that what? This shaliach is not considered to be an extension of Shimon, the borrower. So therefore, the Gemara says, kasha l'Rav Chisda. Ultimately, what do you see from here? It's a kasha, right? Rav Chisda, remember again, what did Rav Chisda say? Rav Chisda was the first opinion that said before that if you appoint a shaliach in front of Eidim, so what happens? What happens? That shaliach is an extension of you. He's a bona fide extension of you. Yet you see from here, in this case over here, where the borrower appointed a shaliach in front of witnesses, yet I will say, if the shaliach retrieves the cow from Reuven and it dies in transit, Shimon is not responsible, which shows you that it wasn't in Shimon's refuos. If it's not in Shimon's refuos, that means that what? The shaliach is not an extension of Shimon. And even though shaliach wasn't appointed in the presence of witnesses, that's a kasha of Chisda. To which the Gemara says, no. Kidam Rav Chisda, what's the case over here? Now, how does Rav Chisda explain this? B'sechira ulekito. We'll say it's actually interesting. The shaliach over here was not someone who was appointed in front of witnesses. Rather, again, the shaliach over here was someone who often does things for Shimon. Literally, again, schira ulekito. Rashi says over here, lekito shelakto etzlo lador imo bebeso litzav sab ba'alma. So we'll say lekito means he's a guy who lives around Shimon's house. Ultimately helps him with stuff, right? Like a butler type of guy. Usechiro. Rashi says ultimately again he's a guy who works for Shimon. So we'll say so these are people who are very closely associated with Shimon and do work for and on behalf of Shimon, but are not a formally appointed shaliach. So because of that, when they go to get the cow from Reuven, and Reuven chooses to send it with them, that's Reuven assuming the risk. Because these people, as much as they work with Shimon, they are not the agent of Shimon. This particular person, Srilakito, is not the agent of Shimon. So therefore, if Reuven sends the cow, Reuven is the owner, sends the cow back to Shimon to borrow with one of these guys, the risk is on Reuven. And if the animal dies in transit, that's on Reuven, not on Shimon. Very interesting. So Tanan, let's analyze this a little bit more. Tanan. Lo yitain lo libno, v'lo lishlucho. So we'll say, now listen to this. So we'll say, this is our Mishnah, right? So our Mishnah spoke about the idea that if I steal from Reuven, and now again, in our Mishnah's case, I swore falsely, I admitted that I swore falsly. We'll say, so now I want to do tshuva. So what happens? When returning the object, I cannot give it to the victim's son, nor tes shaliach. So Gemara says, Hay shlucho hechitami. Once again, what's the case of giving it to the victim's shliach? What is that case? So the Gemara says, Id v'lo asal be'edim. If we're talking about a case where let's say Reuven, the victim, did not appoint the shliach in front of witnesses, mina yadina. Then I will say, how would anyone know that this is his shliach? Rather, I will say, you see from here that what? Even if Reuven went ahead and appointed the shaliach in front of witnesses, I still can't pay back the shaliach. I have to pay back Reuven. But say, who does that contradict? That contradicts Rav Chisda. Because Rav Chisda said, any time that you go ahead and you appoint a shaliach in the presence of witnesses, halacha l'maisa, that's an extension of the person himself. Tir Gemara Chisda b'schira ulekito. No. It's as we said before, I will say, who's the shaliach in the Mishnah? Schira ulekito. The guys who often work for Reuven, right, to live by Reuven, but are not a formally appointed shaliach. Aval shliach shasal be'edimai. But I will say, what would be if halacha l'maisa, Reuven, the victim, had appointed an actual shaliach in the presence of witnesses? Ultimately, again, then that person would be a bona fide shliach. So we'll say, if Reuven, the victim, were to appoint an actual shaliach in the presence of witnesses, I would be permitted to pay back that individual because that individual is considered to be an extension of the principal himself. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, adatani seifa, aval nosin hu l'shliach bezdin. So we'll say, if that's the case, then when the end of the Mishnah says that if I can't, for whatever reason, track down the victim, that I could go ahead and give the stolen money back to the shaliach of bezdin. If that's the case, liflog v'lisnei bedidei. But instead of introducing a new case, why don't you instead go ahead and qualify the first case? Say as follows: Shliach shasa be'edim. So sorry, liflog v'lisnei bedidei. Shliach shasa be'edim. Hachanami dahavi shliach. So we'll say. So why don't you say the following? Why don't you say like this? When can't you go ahead and return? So say if I steal from Ruvain and I now swear falsely, and then I admit it, so now I have to pay back Karen and Chomesh. So the Mishnah says you have to give it directly to the owner. And you can't give it to a shaliach. Why don't you say in the Mishnah, when is it true that you can't give it to the shliach? That's only a shliach that wasn't appointed in front of witnesses. But a shliach that was appointed in front of witnesses, then you could return the stolen money back to that individual. To which the Gemara says, Amri lo psikale. Here's what I will say. The problem is the Mishnah doesn't quote it because it's not an absolute ruling. How so? Shliach Bezdin lo shna asal nigzal v'lo shna asal gazlan havi shliach psikale. Havi shliach psikale. So here's what's interesting. When you utilize Bezdin as a shaliach, so we'll say now watch this. Whether the thief or the victim appointed Bezdin as the shaliach, ultimately again to receive repayment of the stolen object, it works. Doesn't matter who appoints Bezdin. However, we'll say therefore again, in that because that is an absolute ruling, that's why the Mishnah stated it. However, shliach shasal be'edin, but also when it comes to a shaliach appointed in front of witnesses, techi asal nigzal hu dahavi shliach. So we'll say if the victim appointed that shaliach, it works. So the Gemara says asal gazlan lo havi shliach. I will say, but if let's say the thief were to appoint a witness were to appoint the shliach in front of witnesses to work on behalf of the victim, that wouldn't work. Therefore, lo psikale. Therefore, the Mishnah doesn't include it. In other words, the Mishnah only likes to include absolute rulings, doesn't like to go ahead and include qualified rulings. So the Gemara says, "Ula fuke mi Hy'd Tana." And both says this comes to exclude the following ruling of the following Tana. Which Tana? Both says the Gemara says, "Rabbi Shimon Elazar Omer shliach bezdin shaso nigzal v'lo aso gazlan." So both say if you have a shliach bezdin that was appointed ultimately by the victim but not by the thief, or ultimately the thief appointed him, and then ultimately again the victim sent a shaliach to go and collect the item, ultimately potter. So I'll say, it comes to exclude this opinion of Rabbi Shmuel Silber, who holds that ultimately again you really need both parties to go ahead and be involved in order to appoint a shliach with Bezdin. So I'll say, so good. Let's pause here for just a second. So what do we have? So first thing I'm going to say, you should just know, we paskin like actually we're not really finished yet. Let me go a little bit weiter. First. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar both hold shliach shasal be'edim havi shliach. That halacha l'maisa, if you make a shaliach in front of witnesses, it works. Or we'll say, what does it mean it works? What does it mean it works? That the person who appoints that shaliach essentially is making that shaliach an extension of himself. Or we'll say, like the position of Rav Chisda. I v'im tomar mishnah seinu. But then what about our Mishnah? Because our Mishnah says that the thief cannot return the stolen object to a shaliach. What do you do with that? B'mamtzi lo shaliach. So we'll say ultimately again, that's a case, interestingly enough, the case the Mishnah will say is where ultimately again the victim kind of presents the thief with an opportunity for a shaliach. What does that mean? Listen to this. Damrele is li zuzi gabe planya velo kamashader lehu. Is chazile dilma inchi hu delo mashkech l'shadurele. So Jose, this is very interesting. So Jose, the case then should be the following situation where I stole from Ruvain, and what happens? Ruvain says to Shaliach, do me a favor, Silber owes me money. He hasn't paid me back yet. Maybe it's because he doesn't have a courier. So why don't you go ahead, go introduce yourself to Silber, give him a shalom aleichem, tell him that you know me, Ruvain, and maybe he'll send back the money with you. So both say that's much more of the victim kind of presenting the thief with an opportunity to transport the money, but is not formal shlichus. Inami, the other possibility is kid Rav Chisda b'schiro likito. The other possibility I will say of ultimately again of the Mishnah is talking about a situation where what? Where Allah Lamaisa, it's not the formal shaliach of the victim, rather it's schiro likito, right? The guy works with him, the guy lives with him, but it's not a formal shaliach. So we'll say, so let's pause here for just a second. So here's what we have, we'll say. What we have, number one, is just the basic ruling of the Mishnah. What's the basic ruling of the Mishnah? I stole from Ruvain, I then swear falsely, and then I admit. What's the halacha? Chayiv three things. What are the three things? Number one, Keren, Chomesh, Asham. Both sides the Mishnah says, in order for me to have tshuva, right, to achieve tshuva, what do I have to do? Return the object directly to the victim. Even though under the normal circumstances it seems to be without the shavua, ultimately I wouldn't have to, but Allah Almighty here, because I took a false oath, there's a heightened level of behavior necessary in order to achieve kapara. The Mishnah explicitly says, I cannot give it to Reuven. Reuven is the victim. I cannot give it to Reuven's shaliach. So I will say, so now interestingly enough, how are we setting up that case? So I will say, so I'm just going to bring this all together. It's if Reuven, the victim, were to appoint a real shaliach, then I will say, what does it mean to appoint a real shaliach? What does that mean? What's involved in appointing a shaliach? You appoint this person in front of witnesses. You are my shaliach to execute things on my behalf. So I will say, what is the status of such a shaliach? What is his status? He's an extension of me. That is bona fide shlichus, and I will say, again, plugging that into the Mishnah, if I were to find Reuven's bona fide shaliach, who was appointed in front of witnesses, like Rav Chisda, I could return the stolen object to that person. Therefore, when the Mishnah says that I, the thief, can't give it back to the victim shliach, that's talking about one of two cases. Either schiro ulekito, which is a person who looks like a shliach, but what do I say? Looks like a shliach because he's always with Reuven and he's helping Reuven with stuff and doing stuff about Reuven, but he's not a shliach. Or where the victim, told shaliach, go and present yourself in front of thief, because maybe he needs a courier, but it's a courier service. It's not an actual shaliach. But I will say, but halacha l'maisa, if Reuven, the victim, were to appoint a real shaliach in front of witnesses, that person becomes an extension of the victim himself in accordance with the Psaka Rav Chisda. Incredible. Am Yisroel. What says? Am Yisroel. 104b. Ein meshalten mos b'diyukni v'afilu edim chasum alav. So we'll say this is another interesting case over here. So we'll say, once again, this is now not a theft case. Imagine the following scenario. I go ahead and I deposit money with Reuven. I deposit money with Reuven. Okay, we'll say now I want to get it back. I want to get my deposit back. So what do? I go ahead and I send the shaliach, and I send the shaliach. Now I will say, now remember, right? Just let's play this out. Right, so I send the shliach to Reuven to go ahead and retrieve my money. So we'll say, so now what's the problem? Guy shows up at Reuven's house, says, I'm here representing Silber. I'm Silber shliach. Give me back the money. If you're Reuven, you're gonna say what? Get out of here. I don't know you, right? And I'm not giving you the money because if it turns out that you're a fraud, then I'm on the hook again to repay the money to Silber. So I have this all thought out. What do? I go ahead and I give him like a Shmuel Silber seal, right? I have a seal, a stamp. I give it to shliach. I say, shliach, present this. Now you are a credentialed shaliach because you're coming with Silber's seal. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Masalo bal pikadol shliach simanin v'kasav lo chosmo bi'igeres. So I will say, so I go ahead, I appoint the shaliach, and I give the shaliach like my signature or my seal. So I will say, so now I give shaliach, some type of signet or some type of seal. This shows that is really coming on my behalf. So I will say, what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda says, the name of Shmuel, that this doesn't work. In other words, that Reuven, who's holding onto the pikadon, should not go ahead and give the money to this guy, to the shaliach, because that's not being credentialed enough. But I'll say, even if it has my seal, and there are witnesses that are signed beneath my seal, ultimately, again, Reuven, the person holding onto the deposit, has a right to say, no, not going to give it back. Not going to give it to this guy. Rabbi Yochanan says in Edim Chasun Lo Mishachan. Rabbi Yochanan says, listen, maybe the seal by itself is not enough, but if the shaliach shows up with the seal and there are witnesses signed on it that say this is Silber's seal, ultimately, again, the person holding onto the pikadon absolutely should return to the shaliach. Okay, so I'm in the Shmuel, my takanta. So we'll say, this is actually pretty interesting. So according to Shmuel, we'll say, so how is it that I could retrieve my money via a shaliach? So we'll say, you hear what's happening over here? Right? I went ahead and I deposited money. By the way, we'll say, it doesn't matter if it's a deposit or a loan, whatever it is. In other words, but I deposited something with Reuven. Now I want it back. I don't want to go to Reuven myself. So again, I think I have a great idea. I appoint the shaliach, and I give him, my seal. Shmuel Silber seal, and now there's even witnesses signed under the seal that it's my seal. And yet Shmuel says, no, that doesn't really work. In other words, Reuven has the right to say, I'm sorry, but I don't trust this setup because I'm afraid that if I give you the money and something happens in transit, that I'm going to go ahead and be on the hook. So Reuven has a right to refuse to give the money. So according to Shmuel, so what does work? Tell me what. Gemara says, "My takantai." Tell me what does work, because here we can't have a situation, Rabbi say, where I'm going to have to travel to Reuven to get back my money. It doesn't make any sense. I have to be able to somehow affect this through a shlichus. So Rabbi say, Gemara says, "My takantai." Rabbi say, in life, in general, it is always easy to point out problems, right? If you want to be a successful person in life, pointing out problems is not the key to success. Be a solution-oriented individual. Okay, there's a problem, I got it. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? I both say, my takante is such a good mantra for life. We have my dahava, that's always number one, right? And number two is my takante. Good. There's a problem. What's the solution? What's the solution? We can talk about why it's a problem, how it's a problem, it's always been a problem, it's always been wrong, whatever. My takante. What's the solution? How do we navigate through this? So the Gemara will tell you, Ki ha Rabbi Abba having masik zuzi b'Rabbi Yosef bar Chama. What's this interesting case? It's so interesting. Rabbi Abba lent money to Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef bar Chama. Okay. Amar le Rav Safra. Shabbos says, now watch this. So Rabbi Abba, who's the lender, said to Rav Safra, Bahadi de asis, when you go to visit Rav Yosef bar Chama, do me a favor. I sinu nihile, bring the money back to me. Okay, pretty straightforward. Ki Azala Hasan, so I will say Rav Safra went to visit Rav Yosef bar Chama, the borrower. Amarle Rava Bere. So we'll say, now listen to this. So now Rav Safra asked Rav Yosef bar Chama for the money back, right? He said, here, listen, I'm here representing Rabbi Abba, give me the money, and let me take it back to the lender. So we'll say, listen to this. Rabbi Abba's son, Rava, intervened. His mikasav l'cha his kabalti. So do you have a shtar? Do you have a document? Do you have a document from the lender, from Rabbi Abba, that says his kabalti? In other words, that halacha l'maisa, that if my father gives you the money, if he pays you back the money, do you have a shtar that essentially says giving the money to you, Rav Safra, is as if Rabbi Abba has received it? In other words, the son, Rav, is saying, listen, Rav Safra, it's not that we don't trust you, but if my father gives you the money, do we know with certainty that he has fulfilled his obligation and he's done? In other words, do you have a piece of paper or a document that says you are the bona fide agent of collection? And once you receive the money, it's as if Rabbi Abba, the lender, has received the money. Amar le, lo. Rav Safra said, no, to be honest, Rabbi Abba just asked me the next time I'm in town, and I see ultimately again, and I see your father, Rabbi Yosef bar Chama, that I should collect the money, but I have no such document. So the Gemara says, Amar leilo, ihachi zilbarei shaviyichtov lecha hiskabalti. So Rava says, I'm so sorry, but we're not giving you the money until you have that document. Again, Rava say, by the way, makes perfect sense. It makes absolutely perfect sense. So we're just saying it's not a question of trust. It's a question of we can't be in a situation of paying back the money, giving you the money, and yet still being responsible if something happens to the money. Amrale, lo, so he says, Ihachi, Zilbarei Shaviyichtav L'cha Hiskabalti. So Rav Safra, why don't you go back to Rabbi Abba, and go ahead and just get this document that says that halacha l'maisa, giving it to Rav Safra, is as if I, Rabbi Abba, have received the money. L'sof Amrale, so let's listen to this. So then Rava the son said, the truth is, I kasav l'cha nami hiskabalti lav klumhu. The truth is, even if Rav Safra would write to you his kabalti, it's as if this person received it. Even if Rabbi Abba wrote to you Rav Safra, that when it comes to Rav Safra's hands, it's as if I, Rabbi Abba, the lender, received it. That's not going to be enough either. Why? Dilma ad asis shachef Rabbi Abba v'naflo zuzei kami yasme vis kabalti Rabbi Abba laf klumu. But say, watch this. Rabbi Abba apparently was an older man, so therefore, again, what Rava, the son of Rav Yosef, was concerned about was like this. Rav Safra, even if you go back to Rabbi Abba and you get a document that says when you Rav Yosef pay back the money to Rav Safra, it's as if I, Rabbi Abba, have received it. The concern is that by the time repayment happens, what's going to happen? Rabbi Abba died. If Rabbi Abba died, Rabbi Abba is no longer the owner of the loan. Who's the owner of the loan? The Yarshim, the inheritors. And therefore that document essentially is meaningless. In which case Rava says, my father, Rav Yosef, is still on the hook for the money. So so Parabbi Safra is like, okay, what do you want from me? Right? So okay, once again, my takanta. So what would you like me to do? So we'll say it's incredible. Zil nikninhu lecha agav ara v'ta'at kasavlan hiskabalti. Wow. So we'll say Rabbi was clearly a good businessman as well. So it's like this. Rabbi Safra, here's what I want. You go back to Rabbi Abba. Obviously Rabbi Abba goes ahead and trusts you. Rabbi Abba should be makneh the loan to you of Safra. In other words, he should be makneh. Now literally it says he should be makneh the loan to you agav ara. Also remember again, a loan is movable property. Movable property, ultimately again, you could transfer ownership of movable property. How? Through real property. So essentially, let Rabbi Abba transfer the loan to you through real property. Let him give you a small piece of land, and with that piece of land, he'll give you the loan. Now you're the creditor. Now you're a Safra, the creditor. Okay, so now you're the creditor. You show up at my father's house, Rabbi Abba's house, and now again, when my father pays you, then again I will say, what's happening over here? Done. You're the owner. Now listen. Now obviously, this only works if what? This only works if there is a sense of trust. Ultimately, again, between Rav Safra, ultimately again, and Rabbi Abba. But this is the way to do it, and then we could feel secure. Ultimately, going ahead and repaying the debt. We could feel secure repaying the debt. Incredible. It's fascinating. So let's listen to this. As Rav Papa lent 12,000 zuz bechozai to a person in bechozai. So we'll say, what happened? Now we'll say, obviously Rav Papa wanted to get paid back. But yet again, the borrower was not going to give it to necessarily an intermediary, because again, that's a big risk. So what happened? Achninu nehili l'Rav Shmuel bar Abba, agav aseifa debese. So what did he do? So what did Rav Papa do? He was makneh. He went ahead and he conveyed ownership of the loan over to Rav Shmuel bar Abba, agav aseifa debese, with the threshold of his home, which means he conveyed to him ownership over a small piece of land. And with that small piece of land, he conveyed to him ultimately again the debt itself. So now what happened? So now Rav Shmuel bar Abba went to collect the debt. Ki asa nafik lape atavach. I will say ultimately Rav Papa was so happy, right? When Rav Shmuel bar Abba came back, because Rav Shmuel bar Abba came back with the money, he went out to greet him at Tavach, all the way out. In other words, he went a far distance to greet him because he was so happy. So Rabbi say, what comes out from here is something really interesting. Let's say we take it for granted. So today, somebody does something on your behalf, even if you're not there geographically, the ability to corroborate this is easy. Rabbi say, but this is so fascinating, right? So here in these cases like this, Rabbi Abba lent Rav Yosef all of this money. Rabbi Abba wants to send Rav Safra to go ahead and collect the money. The problem is a liability issue or a responsibility issue. So Rabbi Abba wants to repay the money via Rav Safra. The problem is, if he does so, who has responsibility in that moment? So obviously, you're going to say, if halacha l'maisa, it's going full circle, if halacha l'maisa, creditor appoints an agent in front of witnesses, then that's a bona fide shlichus, assuming that what? Debtor knows that occurred. But if debtor doesn't know that occurred, he has no idea to know what to say, so then what do? Creditor could essentially transfer the debt over to shaliach. Shliach becomes new creditor. New creditor shows up to debtor. Debtor pays back new creditor. Debtor is now done. And shaliach, new creditor, then comes back and gives back the money ultimately to old creditor. All right, we'll say, stop over here for today. Tremendous shkoyach. What a day. All right, have a great day, everyone.